Welcome to the Bayesian Conspiracy. I'm Iniash Brodsky.
I'm Steven Zuber.
And with us today we have Audrey McDowell. She is a teacher, and she is on the podcast because today we are going to talk about schooling and why it is terrible and nobody should ever go to school. And
you got to work on your intros.
Yeah, I know, right?
Little parts.
I'm just trying to, say something that'll get our host right away. Be like, hey, no, let's talk about this because you're wrong about everything.
Well, I'm kind of expecting that, so.
Okay. So, would you like to tell us a little bit about your background in teaching?
Sure. So, apologies in advance, I have a cold right now, so I might be coughing. I have been a teacher at a public charter school for 2 years now. Before that, I went to St. Lawrence University and got my degree in English literature and teaching. While there, I spent God knows how many contact hours in various classrooms from elementary to middle to high school in 3 different schools in New York and one school, a private school actually in London, where I spent 4 weeks. And so I have a decent background in working with kids of all ages in both teaching, test prep, actually running tests with kids, project-based learning, Common Core, kind of the basics there.
Excellent. So you have the new Common Core skills too, right? Because that was not in school when I was around. Stephen, did you get any of the Common Core stuff?
I'm not 100% sure if it was called what Common Core was called back then, or if that's what it was. What's Common Core? Can you lay that down for me?
So Common Core is essentially a set of standards. There are some, I know that the big beef with Common Core, a lot of people put on the internet is like, oh, they're teaching math this new weird way. I don't know much about that. I teach English language arts and social studies. And for me, and I use a mix of both the Common Core, which is the kind of the national standard, and then the Colorado state standards. And the set of standards essentially say in 6th grade, you learn X, Y, and Z in writing, in reading, in fiction and nonfiction. For example, in social studies, 6th graders, they have a focus on like ancient civilizations and Western civilizations. 7th grade is Eastern Civ, and 8th grade is U.S. history. And I know that because I teach at my charter school 6th, 7th, and 8th grade in a mixed classroom.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, the reason that we are having this podcast is because the podcast is specifically aimed at the Bayesian rationalist community. And for, I don't know, almost as long as it's been around, the community in general has kind of been looking sort of side-eye at the whole schooling system. I believe one of Robin Hanson's many refrains is that, schooling isn't about education. And it has recently been coming up again, making the rounds. So we figured we would talk about it this time. Do I basically got that right, Stephen?
Yeah. I think the other, reasons it's in the news is that SV wrote a post on it recently, I think inspired by the chapter in Robin Hanson's new book, The Elephant in the Brain on Education. And that was also related to Brian Kaplan's new book, The Case Against Education. And I'm sorry, Audrey, I missed it. What age group did you teach?
6th, 7th, and 8th graders. So that's middle school.
Oh, cool. Awesome. I just wanted to check if that came up later.
Should we, lay down first what the common Bayesian, or not Bayesian, sorry, the common rationalist opinion is about, or at least what the discussion has been recently about education, and then Audrey can, tell us what she thinks from an inside view from the education scene?
Yeah, that's fine. I also want to disclose that I'm a big fan of teachers in general.
Oh, yeah.
My aunt's a teacher, and I don't think anyone's down on teachers or the enterprise. I think it's the quote industry unquote.
Yeah.
And I think the main argument is basically that schools aren't really what their real purpose isn't actually tied to what they say they do or what they say they're for. That it's not so much about educating people and training them for jobs in the most palatable sense. I think it's the cases or the arguments against it are kids or students rather don't learn a lot that's actually applicable to real life or whatever job they're looking to do, even in college. The stuff that's taught, or rather they're not taught things that apply to that. The stuff that they're taught is often quickly forgotten and not retained. And there was a third part. I had this all organized tonight. got a little shuffled there before we got on the call. So sorry about that. Ignacio, take over.
Okay. I would like to also say that I do like the enterprise of teaching. I really liked all my teachers. I really liked most of my teachers when I was going to school. And I enjoy teaching. Like, I have 3 younger siblings, and, I remember teaching them about, like, the basic physics of how a seatbelt will save your life one day, which was really fun, by strapping an egg into a roller skate and rolling it into a wall. So I kind of wanted to be a teacher up until the point where I didn't want to go to college anymore, and I couldn't get a teaching job without a degree or some sort of, formal training in that, so defaulted to accounting. But the major problems with education as they're set forth is that a lot of schooling does not seem to be about really teaching people. And I think this was most aptly demonstrated recently when Washington, D.C. announced that they were going to have to start flunking a third of their kids every year. Or was it more than a third of their kids? It was drastic increase in the number of kids they have to flunk, simply because they are now going to start enforcing some of the standards that they have. And the standards are basically along the lines of, if a kid is 15 minutes late for a period, he counts as gone for the whole day. And if a kid has more than 20% absences in a school year, then he has to be flunked. And a lot of kids in high school there take their younger siblings to their schools first and show up late to their first period. And so they are automatically flunked in a lot of classes. And this led to various observations along the lines of, the kids aren't really being brought there to learn in so much as they are being corralled as a place to be kept during the day and to be taught things like conformity and submission, which is what employers mainly want. And on top of all that, I think one of my major complaints about school is that I believe it's lots of times actively psychologically harmful to people. Socially, it is almost a prison-like environment, the way the kids are set up, and I think it's in large part due to the fact that their main criteria is, are you there or not? The test is, do you accept this as a makeshift prison for 8 hours a day? And that seems to be the most important things. As long as you show up, you get kicked out the door. And like Stephen was saying, a lot of the things that kids are taught, they don't retain, and they aren't really applicable. I remember seeing a statistic along the lines of, during the 3 months of summer vacation, kids lose like half of what they learned during the year. And that also led to speculation like, is this because they are being taught things they aren't ready for? Or is it a matter of because kids are just being taught to the test to guess the teacher's password in the parlance of the rationalist community, and over the summer they forget the teacher's password? Is it due to fraud because their grades are being inflated at the end of the year so they can get moved on, and then they're kind of deflated at the beginning of the year so that it'll look like they've progressed more throughout the course of a year? There's a lot of questions, but a lot of what the speculation comes down to is that, look, this thing really isn't all that handy, and unless you're teaching kids to conform, and it just seems like that is my experience too. Like, I learned a lot of things in high school, but those were all things that I really wanted to learn, and the things that I was forced to learn, I have forgotten. Even the things that I wanted to learn, I basically never used in my life. I just really enjoyed learning them, and I would have learned them anyway if I had access to some sort of teachers, but the fact that everyone else in school was forced to be there and resented being there made it a really uncomfortable environment, and I don't think children should be forced to be in such settings if they have better things to do with their time. I'm sorry for that long rant there.
So a lot of the things that you guys are bringing up are quite valid and come more from the administration and the governmental standpoint than from the education standpoint. And this is not just speaking as because I basically have a teacher's dream job. I can teach however I want. I have very small classroom size. I get to plan a spring trip to take the kids on. In fact, we're leaving on Sunday to Kansas City. That being said, I have visited and worked in plenty of other schools where the focus has been shifting. And that's the good news, is that educators are pushing back. Educators, we go to school and we want to teach, the content because we love it. I'm an English teacher because I love literature, but we also want to teach applicable skills. And that's something that's been focusing on. In fact, my last professional development class was about, they call it the 4 C's, which is creative thinking, collaboration, communication, and critical thinking. Creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication. And that's being implemented in classrooms across the country in terms of getting students, because those are the more marketable skills. Those are the skills that will actually help you become a lifelong learner. That's the goal of most teachers, most people who are in the education business to educate, is to help kids become lifelong learners. And that's why you have fond memories of your teachers.
Yeah.
And luckily, administration is also sort of making that move. I visited a public school district in Westminster last year, which has shifted to the same style of learning that my school uses, which is proficiency based. Rather than you're graded A, B, C, D, or on a 4.0 scale, you're graded on proficiency. You show proficiency through doing the work, showing that you've mastered a topic. And by mastering it, that's not just spurting back the content. That's using the skills. You have to be able to research. You have to be able to compile information. You have to be able to write or speak about it. So that's the good news, is that a lot of places are trending towards moving towards those skills. Like you say, well, kids forget it. Yeah, kids forget content. We do too. Everyone does. Our brains don't have the space for all of it. I was a wonderful math student. I, got into Calc 2 by the end of high school. Can't remember how to do algebra now because I've not used it in 6 years. But the more we use those skills, the more they happen. And the summer slide happens even if you're not teaching to the test. My co-teacher and I, there's only 2 middle school teachers. He teaches math and science. I teach ELA and social studies. We see the summer slide happen every year with almost every kid, because most of them, when they go off to summer, they don't do any academics. Their parents don't have them read every night. They don't practice math. So these skills I have to often reteach. Here's how you write an essay to kids who've done it with me for 2 years. Mm. And they're just like, oh yeah, I remember this now.
Doesn't that mean though that writing an essay really isn't an important skill?
Well, the point of writing an essay, it's not about, here's how, you have to write about the Lord of the Flies or whatnot. It's how do you take the information in your head and put it on paper, which is a skill. You're on Facebook. You wanted to get this podcast together. It took you a skill in order to say, here's the information I have to get across. Here's the order I'm going to put it in. And here's how I'm going to make my sentences flow and cohesive. That's what you were trying to teach with the essay writing or with the oral reports, is that in many modern jobs, you have to do some sort of writing, some sort of oral report, oral presentation, customer service. You have to be able to talk to people. That's part of the collaboration, group work. So a lot of the things, assignments that we do, it's not you have to write an essay because essays are important. You have to write an essay because the skills you're building to write it are important.
I've seen a lot of distinction being made on really all the posts I've been reading lately between schooling and education, where the argument is that schooling is, at most, or is more of a signaling game where you're showing off rather than being taught very much. Like I can afford to sit in school and focus on just one thing for this 8 hours. I'll make a great employee. And whereas education is more about learning things, and that the argument being made is that schooling is not required for education due to, lots of kids who want to learn things will simply learn things. The best way to learn reading for most kids is to play, well, not anymore now that there's voice acting, but it was to play video games that required reading, because then all of a sudden they were really motivated to learn how to read. I have learned almost everything that I have wanted to do by myself with I think right about 6th grade was the point where school stopped being really useful. Everything before that, like basic literacy and numeracy, was really important and laid a good foundation. But everything after was just fun stuff that I enjoyed learning, and I'm appreciative for that. I really enjoyed it, but I think that anyone who wants to learn something will be self-motivated to educate themselves, and that's the best way to learn. And forcing them to go to school can beat the joy of learning out of them.
I work with middle schoolers every day of my life, pretty much. Even kids who are self-motivated still have to learn how to learn. I work with some amazingly self-motivated, intelligent, driven 8th graders, and they still have to do the steps in order to learn how to learn. You may have had a knack for it or an innate talent. I did too. I was a very easy learner. Things came to me very, very easily. But a lot of these kids have to work. They have to put the effort in order to gain those skills. And they are skills. And then they have to practice them over and over and over again. You say, well, writing essays, what's the point of that? When I went to college in my first year, we were all required to take a class that was basically writing essays 101, because every class required essay writing, even in the sciences and the STEM. And there's a lot of kids who really struggled with that, because in their schooling, I will say that, they didn't practice it much. They really did not learn that skill. I did. And so I had the advantage. And so the repetition and then growing the depth is what is important. And the depth of the learning will lead to the lifelong learning. You are lucky. Not every kid is that lucky. And some kids take a while to become motivated. Some of them are really intelligent, but they're not motivated until something clicks. And that happens because their brains are still developing. The prefrontal cortex, the very front of their brain, is the last thing to develop. In fact, it's really not done developing until you're about 25 years old. And so the stuff that, we make a decision. We decide, I'm going to sit down and put the time into this. They don't have that sort of decision making. That they are very impulsive. That's why kids, we look at them and say, why are you making this dumb decision? They don't think through stuff. They don't think through the consequences. And so the same thing applies to education. We think, well, it's obvious. If you want to learn, you just sit down and learn. But to them, they don't put the pieces together. They don't realize, if I don't sit down and learn how to learn now, then I'm going to struggle later. They don't put the pieces together. And so they need help to get there. Some of them do it faster than others.
I think I wanted to add a couple things to that, just adding on that point, that I think a lot of kids can be motivated to learn on their own and, pick up what they're interested in. But I think the example that you had of being good at writing essays from school and then having to do it in college. So school trained you well for school in that particular regard, but and then I guess in your professional life, you're also probably writing essays or something because you're close to that system. But so the other thing that people in the rationality circles say that school is for is domesticating humans, in the sense that our ancestors wouldn't have been good at, and we can look at that by seeing what happened when people moved factories to other countries that didn't have the same sort of education system. Getting somebody to sit down and do something that they don't really want to do for 8 hours a day doesn't come naturally to us. People rebel at that. So getting good at that in school and picking up the skills to do a job, even if it's not what you're particularly driven to do, is something that school does. And I don't think that that's a negative thing, at least for people who want jobs and don't have the luxury of finding their dream job, right? So, cause then, if your work feels like work and you have to, clock in and do stuff like everybody else, having a 15-year or so period, or however long kids are in school, 12, I guess K through 12, and then some college or whatever, having practice going by a schedule. I've had lots of jobs, and almost all of them make me come in at a certain time. I can take a break for a certain amount of time at lunch, or between or in the middle of the day or something. If the workplace is the first time you're exposed to that sort of environment, people would freak out. And in fact, do. I think that Hansen talks about some of those cases, and I bet they're in Kaplan's book, which I haven't read. But like I said, I think that there's one, you can put a nasty spin on that and say, see, it's just about, corralling people and breaking them. But I don't think that's not what I'm trying to say. I think it's just an important facet of the system, but one that people don't really talk about. I did want to backpedal for a second. I think in the introduction, you used the phrase guessing the teacher's password. Mm-hmm. I was wondering if you wanted to explain what that was and if we could get Autumn's feedback on that.
Oh, sure. It's it kind of is what it sounds like, where the students don't necessarily know the reason behind what's happening. They just know what the student wants to hear. I think Feynman gave an example of this when he was, it was such a complicated example now that I can't recall exactly what it was. It was something about the light coming in from outside and bouncing off a lake. And he was asking the students in his class if they could use this as a way of determining the polarization of the light. And they all looked at him blankly, and he said something about the, light moving through an index of refraction. And they immediately jumped up and recited word for word exactly what all the physics terms applicable. And then he was like, well, water is an index of refraction. You can use this knowledge to figure out which way the light is polarized. And I'm murdering this example because I don't remember the details. But they never put those two together. And this was new information to them. So a lot of school seems to be figuring out what your teacher wants to hear and then giving that to the teacher. And since it's not that valuable of a skill when you are not interacting with the teacher, it tends to fade. And I was a bit of a teacher's pet as a kid, so I loved guessing the teacher's password. I would write the most exquisite essays and get awesome grades on them. But when I am not dealing with a teacher, as I haven't in 2 decades now, I don't use that skill. I don't, you don't really use essay writing in the business world at all. You want to get your point across quickly and with as little fuss as possible. I don't know. I'm not saying it's a useless skill, but I think a lot of people say they want education, and I think there's better ways to get it than the school system we have right now. Are you familiar with the unschooling movement at all?
Not really. I'm sure if you define it, I will recognize people in my community who are moving towards that.
Oh, yeah. You live in a cool little hippie commune up there.
Yeah.
Audrey's in Crestone, which is one of the most hippie places here in Colorado. It's kind of neat. Unschooling is when you pull your kids out of school and basically just let them do whatever. You don't even do homeschooling, really. You say you do homeschooling, but the kids run around and play and educate themselves. I'm sorry, go ahead.
We call those feral kids.
Okay.
Yeah, we have them. We have them here.
Do you find that they tend to learn the things that they're interested in?
No, absolutely not. When those kids come into the charter school, they have very few skills that they can use in order to learn. They've learned that they can get away with things that they want. They've learned that they don't have to hold to any sort of schedule. They learned that they don't have to really respect. It's actually really difficult with those children sometimes. And that's not in we're the authority and you have to sit down. It's we all are here to learn. And because we're all here to learn, you kind of had to sit down and shut up for a little bit so I can help you begin to learn with everyone else. So those kids really do struggle when they come into school. I've had it too, where kids went and quote unquote homeschooled for a year or two, and they're always behind academically. Always. Now, those who are inclined to learn and want to learn and were stifled learning, they catch up really quickly. I have a couple students in my classroom who came in pretty far behind. They're motivated, and so they caught up because they wanted to, and they're even ahead in some areas, and it's awesome to see. But they were definitely handicapped when they first got into the school. Now, that's not to say all homeschooling is inferior and bad, but the homeschooling that these kids had was. And then kind of to backtrack to Stephen's point a little bit about the learning how to keep a schedule and whatnot. In my school, it's actually kind of difficult for a lot of the kids, especially because in previous years, we were a very, very loosey-goosey school. Whatever goes, your heart tells you that you have to, you just can't do it today. So you're going to sit in the corner and blah. And so my co-teacher and I have had to work really hard to instill a schedule because most jobs, most things have a schedule. If you say, even if you're a stay-at-home mom, your kid has a schedule. You have to keep up with the feedings, get the grocery, get the cleaning, all that stuff. There's things that we have to keep up with in our world. And there's another point I was going to make, and it's slipping off here.
You mentioned the kids that love to learn, that even if they were raised feral, when they come in, they catch up pretty quickly. Like, in my opinion, the ideal kind of school would be one where teachers are available and they teach, but attendance isn't mandatory. Like, what do you do with the kids who are forced to be there and don't want to be there? Because in my experience, that was what made school really crappy, was those students.
Yeah, and it depends on the severity of that student's dislike. And here's what I'd say about kids who don't like school. Oftentimes they don't like school because of a bad experience with a teacher, or they are, oftentimes they're not challenged enough. And that is a failing both on administration and on certain educators. Because there are teachers out there who come in, they get the paycheck, they don't want to interact with the kids, they don't want to be part of that. And that's a problem. I think a big part of fixing education is getting good educators in. That's a big help. That being said, even with inspired, really engaged educators, there's going to be kids who do not want to be there. So in my classroom, I have some kids who are not quite the most motivated. They don't really want to work, but they're there. They do put effort in. A big part of their schooling or their education is the social aspect, is the aspects of, popped in my head on the subject. And a couple big things that are coming into the education world now, things like grit and failing forward, which are life skills. Grit is, I have to go in and I have to do this job, even if I don't like it. I have to get a paycheck, blah, blah, blah. That's the kind of survival, do what you have to do and keep moving on, even if you feel defeated. And then the failing forward is a similar concept. So those kids who maybe not so academically prone or so interested in the academics, they're still learning some of these other skills. My school calls them core values. They're still learning the core values. So even though they may not be very good at discussing the crucible, they can at least learn other things that they can then take into further education, whatever path education lies. Now, there are children who unfortunately need a lot of outside help before school is the right place for them. I have a student in my classroom who has certain behavior disorders, and even with teachers who really want to, we're there, we give them our all. This student is unwilling to learn, uncompromising. They blow up the classroom. In fact, the student's no longer in my classroom. He sits out with his computer and does computer work because otherwise he completely disturbs everything in the room. And that sucks. Like, it's something that I didn't think I would encounter this early in my teaching career. This is the sort of thing where we have to help the student as a whole child before we can ever get him into academics. And there's students like that across the country, students with home lives that are completely distracted and they can't focus on things. Students who are on the streets, students with a myriad of situations that we can't control for in the schools. And so, no, they're not going to be into the education. And that's valid. And that's some societal things that have to be fixed along with the education. But with the majority of kids who, even if they're not quite into the whole school thing, they'll be engaged in certain parts of the day. They'll be engaged with certain lessons, certain things. It always kind of brings me a smile when I have kind of the students who aren't really into ELA, but they get into a conversation all of a sudden, or they really get into some simulation or other. And most good teachers are going to expand their repertoire. They expand the types of lessons that they're teaching and the content and the skills that we're building to try to hit all the kids at least a little bit. The kids who want to be there and into everything, you're going to hit them all the time. The kids who aren't, you're maybe only going to reach them sometimes, but at least you're going to give them something to kind of cling on to want to continue in education.
I don't know if you can answer this in a public way, since we are, going to be recorded and put out on the internet, and you are a teacher. So if you can't, that's all right, and we'll move on. But I'm wondering, I guess from both of you, what do we do about the fact that some people just shouldn't be in school? Because I'm okay with them not going to school, but that also means they get left behind by society, and you can't really. I guess you could get a job even without a high school degree if our society was structured a little bit better. I mean, a kid should be able to go and get an apprenticeship with a carpenter or a plumber or an electrician at 14, because at 14, you're old enough to learn those things and go into the working world, but we don't let them, and I think that's pretty fucked up.
How many 14-year-olds have you interacted with lately, Inyash?
Lately? Not many, but I remember I was working with my dad when I was 14.
I think you're painting a rosy picture of 14-year-olds.
Yeah. So, again, remember the brain thing I was talking about?
Yeah.
If 14-year-olds are capable of learning that stuff, but they're not capable of the responsibility of holding that position. Now, apprenticeships, I agree with. In fact, my school has mentorships where students learn various skills from various mentors around the community. Some of them are more valuable than others. But I teach 14-year-olds. That's the tail end of 8th grade is 14-year-olds. They're not ready to enter the working world. Now
go on.
And are they ready to take some jobs? Working with family, because I do have kids who work in their parents' restaurants, who work manual jobs. In fact, last summer I hired one of my 14-year-olds to watch the house, like the kind of kid jobs that a lot of us are familiar with. They do that and they're building that stuff up. A full-on apprenticeship or the working world, I don't think so. I think that their education would have to extend a little bit longer in a very structured, very scaffolded environment. We have to give them ways to fail without heavy consequences. That's a big benefit of school, is that for most kids, they can fail, they can flunk a little bit, and there's not going to be serious real world consequences. If we kick them out into the working world, then all of a sudden they're part of their parents paying for the bills. They're part of all these responsibilities that should not be put on them. They are not developed enough yet. They may look old enough. They may sometimes even emotionally act old enough, but they are not.
So I agree with you on that matter, but I don't think people are really, fully grown up until they're in their early to mid 30s anyway. And people before the industrial age started taking on adult responsibilities and, supporting themselves and their families at ages like 14. I think it's...
And make that illegal for a reason, because it's just not right. A kid should have a childhood. If, why we push them in the working world at 14 if they're going to be working till they're 60 anyway? Let them have another 5 or 6 years of freedom before we make them be a part of that drudgery. They're going to be 40 years.
See, I don't consider being forced to go to school as a gift that we're giving to anyone. I would imagine a lot of kids around that age would much rather tool around with a car or something than be forced to come in and be basically in a prison environment where they are forced to sit and just endure hours that they don't want to be there. They're not getting anything out of them. They can't socialize with anyone. I mean, it's no wonder they're miserable in school and they make other people miserable too. I would also be miserable.
I think just taking a step back is like, there's a difference between like a 14-year-old bagging my groceries and one repairing the engine on my car, right? I'll trust a 14-year-old or, whatever, a 15 or however old they want to be to help me out at a grocery store, but not to like fix my car, right? So
yeah, but he's not going to be fixing your car by himself. It's under a apprenticeship program where he's there with another guy and not making very much. He's still basically living at home with his parents. He's being paid in the skills that he's learning as he's working.
Sure, and then I think there's an alternative there that a lot of people take, which is people don't finish school or they finish high school and getting a high school degree doesn't really open any doors for anybody anymore anyway, but you can do like trade schools after. Like I got a useless degree in psychology and never did anything with it, then went to a coding boot camp and now do that for a living.
Yeah, many of our generations
community college offer automotive courses and stuff to get like a trade degree kind of thing, or that sort of thing. So I guess I was wanting to just not get too bogged down in a specific example and just point out that there are other avenues to go down that sort of alleviate some of these concerns maybe.
And I think that's mainly what I'm coming down on, is that I think education is a great thing, but I think schooling is not necessarily the same thing as education, and schooling is not necessarily right for everyone, and I think our society is kind of fucked up in the way that it forces everyone to go to school.
Well, like you said too, you asked what do we do with kids who shouldn't be in school?
Yeah.
And, how you define that is going to be tough. But maybe somebody who, just, can't go to school. I was almost in that camp. I was in trouble a lot, especially in elementary and junior high. I got bored and I would just goof around, or I'd do whatever it was, and I would make a mess and make a ruckus and stuff. I don't know how many lines I'd have to cross before someone kicked me out of school, but that would have sucked, right?
Yeah.
Leaving aside the problem of how you define that line, there's also the problem that it's not like a line where, the kids on this side aren't good for school, the kids on this side are. Let me rephrase that. Maybe the kids who are good for school are in a box, and there's all different kinds of places to be outside that box. And so, if you're not good for one kind of school, you might be good for another kind, but we can't set up institutions for every kind of non-typical learner or something, right?
Right. Well, there's many ways to get an education. Like, a lot of our generation's greatest programmers dropped out of high school. Well, one of the things I'm sort of worried about is that in the modern society, the way it's set up, if you don't have a certain amount of both education and, on top of that, just raw intellect, if you don't meet a certain minimum level, you're basically unemployable. And, it's creeping up every year. In 100 years from now, even unless you're like in the top 10% intellectually, it may be that 90% of the human population simply cannot be economically employed in any useful field. And what do we do then?
Now I feel like we're getting far afield. That doesn't really relate to the education system.
Okay, that's true. Sorry.
That's just like we're all fucked. We're all in 50 years, and that's probably true no matter what. That's not relating to whether or not it makes sense to make high school kids read Shakespeare or something, right?
Right.
Or whatever other thing. Don't get me wrong. I'm enjoying where you're going, but I feel like we're getting far afield, and I don't want to leave Audrey. If you find, what do you think? Is this something you want to talk about, or?
We can look at many different models of the future and where we could go, but if we look at the trend, education, more and more people are getting an education. Now, that's not to say that there are people left behind. When I was in college, I read a book about a woman and her child, her whole family, and they're a white family living near the Appalachians. They're illiterate. And the book was about the author trying to teach mother and son how to read. It's absolutely heartbreaking because the mother was trying to learn how to read because she realized how little she had and how few opportunities she had by not having this. And then they got in fights with her husband because he was illiterate and proud of it almost. And it was like a societal thing with their family. And here's the thing. I'm an educator. My goal is to give impart as much education as I can to as many as I can. And that's the trend with education. We're trying, educators, not just across the country, but internationally, and administrations are starting to hop on it too. They're trying to alleviate these problems of it's a prison. We're not actually teaching them. They're not taking this into it. It's just basically keeping count of the young citizens in our country. And there are people out there absolutely who really aren't going to do well in education. They're not going to do well in high school. They're not going to go to college. They may even drop out of high school. Like if you ask me, Audrey, look at your class. Can you point out any of your students that, really aren't going to benefit much from education? I say, yep, that one there. He's not motivated. They're going to be content doing something that doesn't require an education for their life. And that's fine. But to say, well, some people are bored, some of them are acting out, some of them aren't getting anything out of it, so let's scrap the whole thing, is absolutely ridiculous. Graduation rates are rising. People going to college, the numbers are rising. The trend is positive. I was just looking before we hopped on here, some essays that people wrote about education and how it looks in 2030. And they're looking at statistics and the trends and what education means and how we're trying to implement it. And people are really, a lot of teachers and a lot of schools are trying to make the move from what you call schooling to education. It is highly valued. And making that move will inevitably leave some people behind. That's what happens in a society. Not everyone's going to be on the same wavelength. But education, the more of it we can provide, the more different things. I say with apprenticeships, let's keep them in school. Let's have them do academics in the morning, send them off to the apprenticeship in the afternoon. Maybe they have two different ones every week so they can get a feel for the different fields out there, the different trades. I'm all for access to higher education, be it trade school, online, college, whatever we do. The more education someone has, the more opportunities that open up in front of them. That's just the reality of the society we live in today. I was also looking at statistics in terms of education versus annual salary or income. And it's true. The higher education, the more likely the higher your income. Now, that's not all the way across the board. I'm a teacher in rural Colorado. I make very little money. And I, have a bachelor's degree. That didn't hold true in terms of the trend. But I had opportunities. I didn't have to pursue teaching. I could have done so much else with the education I have. A lot of people I talk to who have either, they've graduated high school and they've gone to college, but they didn't complete a degree or they didn't get to go to college. They lament that. They wanted a higher education. Again, that's not speaking for every human being. There are those who aren't going to want it. Whether I still think 14 is too young because I work with 14-year-olds. I know them. I see how they act. I have some 14-year-olds, 8th graders who think they're ready for high school and they go up and they all strut about like, I'm in high school. Like, no, you're not. And the way you act, it's very, very clear. My boyfriend teaches tech to the high schoolers, and actually he teaches tech to K-12. It's a K-12 school. And seeing the 8th graders next to the high schoolers, it's a clear difference in maturity and ability to sit still and focus on a task that they're interested in. Because these 8th grade boys, they love it. They love technology. They love science. They don't have the same capacity as the 10th grader or 11th grader to sit and work on a plane for an hour and a half and fiddle around with all the things. They're excited about the idea of it, but they don't do the work. And that's just the degree of maturity.
I have a question for you. I recall that middle school was the worst of all the schooling years by far. And you just said that the 8th graders are unable to sit and focus, whereas the 10th graders don't have a problem with it. Is this, unless this is something that was somehow, I don't want to say beaten into them, but taught to them in 2 years of schooling, do you think this was something that they learned in 2 years, or is this, do you think, more of a biological thing where they just grew up and matured to that point in between 8th and 10th grade where they could now do this?
It's a mix. It's a mix. So part of it is that the 10th grader just has the capacity to focus more. Our middle schoolers, we give them 10-minute breaks between each of the morning classes. We have 3 morning classes. We have a 10-minute break between each of those. They have recess still. We make sure to get them PE because they have high energy. They're emotionally, socially still maturing. Absolutely. They have the capacity to sit still. If you walk into my classroom, and this is just the difference between my classroom and my co-teachers. You walk into my classroom during study hall. Everyone is silent. They're working quietly. They're studious for an hour. They walk into the other teacher's classroom and, things are bouncing off the walls. It's science. That's just kind of my personality versus my co-teachers and the way we run our classrooms. Yeah. Now, that's not to say they're always silent all the time. We do lots of different activities in my classroom, but the kids that space is a quiet space, because I'm a quiet person usually. And so I didn't purposely carve it out to be that way. It just kind of became that. Yeah. I'd play kind of some nice soundtracks while the kids were working, and maybe lots of reading and lots of note taking, and that's just the thing that they did. So those same 2 8th graders can sit in my classroom for an hour and work studiously. Part of it is when they go upstairs, it's physically changing places in the building changes the way they act. And part of that, I think, is just the excitement. They want to be in high school, which is awesome. And so, because they want to be there, they're kind of bouncing. They get back in their bouncy stage. So I don't think that's 2 years of sit still and do nothing. Because honestly, the high schoolers are out doing, we see them running around more often than our kids are, in that building. I think it's just a case of, personalities and spaces. Space actually has a big thing. That's actually, part of my professional development is looking at remastering classroom spaces So you have a space for conversation. You have a space for discussion. You have a space for group work. You have a space for quiet time. And, not all of us are blessed with huge classrooms in order to make those spaces. But the spaces moving from one place to another, even within one classroom, can actually help kind of get your brains in certain modes.
Yeah. So
I think probably it's just their brain mode. And yeah, they're 8th graders. They're still not nearly as developed as a 16-year-old.
Do you think the 8th graders would do better to have some other form of schooling then until they get to the point where it's easier for their biology with their brain structure to sit down and do the more studious kind of work that comes more naturally to 16-year-old? Like maybe...
No, I just said that they can do it very, very well. Like you would not, and when I say that they're emotionally, socially, whatnot, less mature, their brain's less developed, that's just in a general, the way they act and the way they behave. Now, like, I'm a middle school teacher. I hated middle school.
Yeah.
I was unchallenged. I despised it. I skipped 8th grade. I wanted to get out of there. I hated middle school. And when I went to become a teacher, I was like, no, I'm not going to teach middle school. I hated it. I want to teach high school. Then they placed me in a middle school classroom, and I loved it because here's the thing with middle schoolers is they still have the energy and the excitement like elementary kids have, but they also are starting to develop their own ability to think independently and think critically. So they're at that kind of sweet spot between elementary and high school where, yes, they can sit down and study, but they can also, you can really get them excited about something. Right? Like people would say, you can't teach the Crucible to middle schoolers. You can't teach Lord of the Flies. Those are high school texts. I taught both of those to my middle schoolers because I know that they're mentally capable of it. Did they need my help to understand a lot of it? Oh, absolutely. Were they fired up? Oh, yeah. The kids were out there during Lord of the Flies going, sucks to your ass, Mar, and quoting from the book and, almost like, can we just leave us for a day while Lord of the Flies it up? And we're like, no, because we're legally responsible for you. So the kids, and that's not to say high schoolers don't have that, but high schoolers, especially in this day and age with the internet, they have a degree of cynicism that the middle schoolers don't have yet. So the middle schoolers are the sweet spot where if we ask them to sit down and be quiet and focus for an hour and really put good work in, they will. And man, they produce such good work. I should send you some of their short stories with their names redacted sometime because they are absolutely incredible. I wish I recorded. We did a model UN about climate change a couple weeks ago, and they were into it. They did the research and they really put forth the time and the effort so they could talk with the other nations and make deals. And then of course they got really excited about it, and then they were like, "No, you betrayed us, Russia!
Yeah.
You vote for this resolution." And they can be studious, but they can also be excited about it. And that's actually a fight that the high school teacher, who is just as inspired and energetic as I am, she's really struggling with the high schoolers because part of their being so quiet is they're also kind of surly and they are very resentful of the school environment. And she's trying to do everything she can to bring them back into it and have the fun, engaging learning. And it takes time. It takes lots of good teachers, lots of years in a row for kids to get there. But I absolutely think if we have that, if we have the ducks in a row, if we have the good teaching practices, which the teacher password, that's bad teaching practice.
Yeah.
And none of the teachers I work with do that because it's bad practice. When I say the summer slide, that's not me and my co-teacher standing up in the front of the room going, tell us what you remember. We have it's not really standardized test, but we have what's called the NWEA MAP testing. And the kids take it 3 times a year, once in the fall, the winter, and the spring. And it studies their growth and it looks at where their holes are and where we can fill those in. It's pretty stress-free. The kids sit down and they do it and they're fine. It's not a stressful test. It's data for us to see where they're going. And that's how we can see the summer slide. And then we don't teach that to that test. I have no idea what's on it. I teach what I teach. And usually because I teach skills, I teach the kids how to research, how to read, how to analyze, how to understand what they're reading. Because that's the important part of ELA. It's not you have to read Shakespeare and understand it. It's you have to read and understand what they're saying to you. Look at the bias. Look at the, look at the author's tactics. Are they using fallacies? Are they using any sort of literary language in order to try to persuade you? Because especially with the internet nowadays, with so many people spouting so much stuff to read, they have to learn how to sift through the bullshit.
I have 2 questions for you, if you wouldn't mind.
Then I have 3.
And then you have 3. Okay. Do you want to do yours first, or?
Well, first one's more of a correction. Audrey, I just realized I think I called you Autumn at least twice. All I see on Skype is AV, and when I move my mouse, I see Enos Brodsky and then AU on the top, and the only other AU I know is an Autumn. So sorry if I called you the wrong name. I apologize for that. If I do it again, don't hesitate to call me out on it. The other question was going to just be, I think, just at a high note, I imagine that many people in the U.S. who are listening to this are going to hear your style of teaching and be crazy jealous. Because I think that the way that, I just realized I graduated 10 years ago, which makes me feel super old. But unless things have changed a lot in the last decade, I think the way that you're doing it is highly atypical. Super desirable and awesome, but I think it's rare. Would you agree with that?
So the way I'm teaching, and that's the big reason I'm teaching at the school I am, is because I have ultimate freedom. Every teacher that I work with or have talked to, they want to teach this way. They want this. Now, I teach to standards. You can ask me what standards are you doing, and I can point out what ones we're doing. And fortunately, a lot of districts are turning away from the Common Core, what's the word? Script, which I have taught that before. I've taught Common Core both with the script and then going off script, if you will. And a lot of districts are allowing teachers to teach the content, but their own way. So it's been kind of a weird decade in that we're trying to figure out how to have standards and how to have standardized education while not stifling the educators. And I think, again, I'm an optimist, but I think positive trends, teachers are being given some more leeway now as we go on. But almost every teacher that wants to be in that in those buildings, they want to teach the way I teach.
Okay, yeah, that's sort of the answer I expected, but I'm happy to hear that it seems like it's getting more and more common. Because, a lot of the my memory of childhood's pretty fuzzy, but I remember just a lot of covering the same material in history class for 5 years. It would just start, basically we did a few weeks on, pre-American history, and then the rest was just whatever Revolutionary War through about World War I. And we would just do that every year with different teachers. It was weird. And I think I went to what's considered a good high school. And my high school history teacher, I guess, did totally break that trend. He was awesome. But
did you observe?
Yeah, I guess
Did you observe the same sort of thing in the public schools where you were observing or teacher assisting or whatever you were doing? Or were those more less ideal?
So it depends on the school I was in. In a couple of the schools in upstate New York, it was more the teachers had the freedom. In the school I student taught in, they actually kind of used me as a guinea pig because they would just get in the scripts for Common Core. So I taught one class by the script and the other class where I took the script and I cut it up and I re-pasted it and did what I wanted with it. And I basically reported back to my cooperating teacher and said, here's what I did and how I did it, and here's how effective it was. And she took that back to the administration. And I think that they're not on script. They were kind of in that gray area if they weren't sure how to implement the Common Core yet. In the schools I visited in Westminster, they absolutely were trying, because they were trying to get the proficiency-based learning. So they're a much, much bigger school and school district. There are limits. Now, part of the reason I can do what I do is because I have 12 kids in my 2 classes. And so it's a lot easier to do it with a fewer number of kids. That being said, there are plenty of teachers in plenty of districts, and the ones I've visited kind of hold true, where they're doing their best to get that sort of engagement and that sort of comprehensive education to as much as they can. So is it harder in bigger districts? Absolutely. Is it possible? Yeah.
I had another quick question. You had mentioned earlier that a lot of more and more kids are seeking higher education. They want to go to college. What's your impression of why that is?
Well, so a big part of it is they need it. And it's kind of an unfortunate circumstances. A lot of jobs nowadays, you need a college degree to get your foot in the door. And I sort of hate that. I hate how a lot of the millennials and younger generation are sort of being forced into such horrible loans just to get a job. I'm a huge advocate for trade schools and associate's degrees and community colleges and everything to get a higher education if one is inclined to do so. And so part of it's necessity and part of it is kids want to. I have middle schoolers talking to me about, they're applying to these special high schools because they're planning on going to these certain colleges or applying around to colleges, and they're excited. They want to do it. A lot of, and of course, I probably have a very high degree of highly motivated kids, percentage-wise in my classroom, but they want to get the most education they can. And I think that that's sort of a trend across the country is a lot of kids see, A, I need this in order to get the sort of job I want, and B, I kind of want this. Education is such a valuable tool. So that's really what it is. It's a tool in order to get what we need and what we want.
Yeah, I loved, being at school, and especially university. I think I have this thing that lights up in me, and it's whatever the cultural descendant of Plato's Academy, just this is where people are coming to acquire knowledge, and I just have this big romantic idea about it. But I think on the other side of the coin, my inner Robin Hanson would probably say that kids want to go to college, like you had said, many of them because they know that they need it for jobs, because they need to signal to their employers, their potential future employers, that look, I'm the kind of person who can go to college. And so yes, I got an A in biology. I realized this is an accounting position, but I got an A+ in biology. And their accountant, their person, the HR people at the accounting position that they want to work for, they don't care that they know biology, but they care that this is the kind of person who can get an A in biology, especially a hard, a tough science or tough subject. Because, hey, this is the kind of person, this tells us, not that they learned anything there that's useful to us, but it shows us that they can buckle down and learn hard material and excel at that. And I think I'm sorry, go ahead.
Okay. Well, I was just going to say that, and part of it's, yes, that they can sit down and get that A, but a lot of colleges, too, are training towards, I mentioned the 4 C's earlier, and that's a big thing employers are looking for is can this candidate collaborate? How is their critical thinking? Are they problem solvers? How do they communicate? And that's a big benefit, at least at my college. And I know there's other colleges out there that have a focus on teaching these skills through the means of the content. And so I'm hoping that that's the trend that goes both in secondary and higher education is the workplace skills that they're really looking for. I think that's the big reason a college degree holds so much weight is because it shows, A, this person can buckle down and get the work done when they need to, and B, more than likely this person has had to collaborate with peers. More than likely they've had to do some sort of leadership in either a TA or other position, and so on and so forth. And that's the attraction of a degree. And it can go beyond that too, certain colleges with certain fields. My college was a leader in education. And so, if I wanted to stay in New York State and be a teacher there, I would have had an advantage because my college was well known. It had a reputation for spitting out good teachers who were, not just good at their job, but motivated. They were knowledgeable. They had all the different trainings they need. So I think that's also part of it. It's not just you got an A in biology, good job. It's everything that comes with that I think is attractive to employers.
For sure. I didn't mean to like push past the other. I guess like to say that it signals the one thing that I said doesn't mean that it doesn't also signal a bunch of other stuff. You're right. Like if it's a more collaborative subject, like the lab component maybe to a lecture course or something. Typically you're doing that with other people, and if you can't work with people, you won't get an A in that lab component, right?
Right.
So yeah, that's valuable to employers too. I think what I was trying to get at with my Hansonian lens was that depending on the student and depending on the subject and all that, but I think he might say that many of them, much of the time, are less concerned about learning anything in college. They're more concerned about like how will this look to my prospective employers with the entire signaling package that this will give.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, when I was that's the entire reason I worked at that school in London. I had to study abroad there for 4 months, and we got to choose a 4-week internship. And we still had to interview and like be chosen back. It wasn't like a here you go thing. But I was like, I want to go into teaching. I'd love to do an internship that's a bit more fun and breezy because it's the end of my time in London. But no, I have to do this at the school because that's going to look great on a resume. And that's why people do internships. That's why people do work studies and whatnot. It's all for that resume.
Oh, I was just going to say we are passing the 1 hour mark, so we're going to have to start wrapping it up pretty soon. Okay. Two sort of questions. The first one, I noticed when you talked about the high schoolers that you said that they were kind of surly and sort of dissatisfied with school. Do you know what caused them to become that way?
I wouldn't say it was dissatisfied and surly with school. It was more with life. And I think a big part of that is, especially as kids are going into high school, they have more access to the internet. They have more access to sorts of points of view that's very, the echo chamber is a real thing. Because these kids who are the cynical, surly ones, they're like that with everything, not just with school. And part of that, and I'm putting up all on the internet, part of that's also home life. Part of that's their life circumstances, situations. Again, in my small town, the feral kids phenomenon is real. The, high schoolers who are kind of homeless, where their parents just kind of leave them to fend for themselves for 8 months is real. So high schoolers also to analyze the world around them, analyze their home situations, and the questioning that began in middle school really becomes a deeper questioning. It becomes resentment sometimes. It can become all sorts of things. And that's because as they're growing up and as they're trying to become who they are, or trying to figure out who they are, it goes so much further beyond just the school. And that's part of when I say the brain development, the emotional development, depending on certain factors in childhood that can hinder that, depending on if the child is using substances, that will absolutely hinder that. In fact, the high school, high schools, not just mine, but I know high schools sometimes have problems with kids smoking weed. As much as I'm an advocate for legalizing, it's just like alcohol. If you start it too young and use it too frequently, it can definitely have an impact on your development in a very much still growing body. So yeah, it's a mix of factors. Some of it might definitely be, some of it might be nothing to do with it. It's child by child.
Okay. I got now, I guess, sort of a personal question for both of you. I personally felt lucky to have survived high school, and I know that part of that was just the immense depression I was going through at the time. But did either of you have a similar sort of experience?
Do you want to go first, or do you want me to?
I don't mind either way.
I guess my quick version is that, I think, high school for me was when life started finally getting good. Kid life was fun too, but for the first time I found instructors that were if not, PhD experts, although some of them were, they were very knowledgeable in what they were teaching. They weren't the ones who were like, oh yeah, I'm teaching you Spanish in junior high and I'm 2 semesters ahead of you at CSU when I take it on at night. Or something like that, right? So I had really good educators that being the super annoying student I was, I'd ask tons of questions, not to try and stump the teacher or be a dick, because I was really curious. And in elementary and junior high, I had some good junior high teachers, but especially in elementary school, I would just get told to sit down and shut up. And I think they felt like they're, like some smart ass kid is trying to make them look like a fool or something. But in high school, every teacher I had knew a ton, and it was awesome. Maybe at least all the ones I remember. There were probably some that sucked, but all of my favorite classes, psychology, biology, chemistry, history, they were all just really gung-ho about their subjects, and they wanted us to be gung-ho about it. So,
yeah. My teachers were all good. It was more the social and psychological situation for me.
Oh yeah, socially, my life was terrible until 5 years ago, so I can't really compare there. I think psychologically I did okay, but I don't think that has anything to do with school. But yeah, Audrey, what's your thought?
So education was my solace in high school. I definitely turned to my teachers, as a source of, not just education, but of social comfort. I really struggled in high school socially. I had quote unquote friends, but they weren't very good friends. I definitely, like a lot of high schoolers out there, I struggled with depression. That turned into some anxiety stuff going into college, and blossomed into more during college. But, there's lots of things going on. So I don't know, high school's rough. I don't look back at it with any sort of fondness. I love the things I learned. I love the things I did. I was in theater, and we put on some amazing productions that came with the consequence of severe anxiety about the productions, because our director was I don't even know the correct term for her. She was a control freak perfectionist who basically lived through the students in our productions. So there's just high pressure environment.
Can I add one thing? Is I want to point out that I had a few friends in high school, and a couple of them listened to the show. So I didn't want to dismiss the idea that I didn't have friends. I made some great long-term lifelong friends there. And the other thing relating to the last thing you said, am I alone in suspecting that trope is super common among like junior high and high school music and band and theater teachers? I found those are the ones who took their job the most seriously. I took choir through junior high, and my teachers there seemed to think that they were teaching, the New York choir. I was going to say New York Orchestra, but they were preparing for the Olympics. Like they thought this was the most serious thing. And I mean, I get like taking your job seriously, but they seemed way invested. Like, getting mad, purple in the face, and slamming their fist on a piano and saying, "Damn it, Zuber!" So anyway,
Yeah.
is that does anyone else agree with that trope?
I never.
Because that was choir. That wasn't the choir teachers. I had very chill choir teachers. I could not have survived both the choir and the theater with such divas.
I didn't have confidence for theater. That sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was a ton of fun, and looking back, I'm very happy with it. But during it was super stressful, not to mention almost all the theater kids were also involved in sports and like AP or IB and academics, and it was just a high pressure environment. And I don't think I even have a single high school friend still on Facebook. I don't know the last time I spoke to any of them.
So I had.
So for me,
Oh God.
I was gonna say, for me, educationally wonderful. Everything else, pretty shit.
Yeah, I mean, I had a similar thing. I really enjoyed the education parts of things. I loved learning stuff, but I mean, I do still have some friends from high school. My hetero life partner Drake, I knew from high school, and a lot of there are some good relationships that came from that, but overwhelmingly, high school was a horrific experience when I wasn't actually learning things. And from almost everyone I've talked to, they all say basically, almost all of them say basically the same thing, that I feel lucky to have survived. And I mean, most people do survive it, obviously, but I think it's a really telling thing that everyone feels that way. And I personally believe it is in large part because schools are structured very much in this prison-like way where everyone has to be there even when they're bored and they don't want to be there, and there's no way to distinguish yourself in any objective way. So it all comes down to social games, to signaling, and to having to tear down other people in order to build up your own social capital. And it's I mean, I hate drawing the analogy back to prisons, but it is kind of like a prison environment where you form these cliques and it's all just about dominating other people. And I think that this is a horrible thing that we subject almost the entirety of our population to during their formative years. I love the education aspects, but school has got some serious social issues that I don't think we should put kids through.
I think for me, one of the weirdest things was like the monitored bathroom breaks. And I totally get like why that has to be a thing, because otherwise, if there was no limit on when you could leave the room, unless you had mature kids, like in high school, they started cutting back on that. But like in junior high, they were really cracking down because kids would just take off and leave the room and come back 20 minutes later, but it's a 50-minute class and they missed, too big of a fraction of it. But like, you've got 3 bathroom breaks that you can use in my class for the semester. And, the analogy to prison, I'm not sure what bathroom breaks are like in prison, but you can probably pee more or less when you want if you're not otherwise occupied. But, things like that, I think just kind of give this air of no autonomy. You don't have the freedom to relieve yourself without permission. And with that, if you do it too many times in a semester, you incur penalties for participation credits or something, right? That part was super weird.
I mean, I agree that some of the structural things can change, but I think a big thing is that the social aspects, a lot of that's out of the control of the adults of the situation. And part of that is kids learning how to interact with each other, how to make this a thing. And that's just what's going to happen. Even if we have the most perfect environment, very low stress, full autonomy, yada, 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 there's going to be conflict. There's going to be drama. There's going to be hurt feelings because kids are still figuring that out. The kids have very little empathy skills. The empathy is part of that brain development that's coming along. They're very me-centered. They're very, a lot of them aren't very observant. They don't, I mean, and part of my job as middle school teacher with my middle schoolers is helping with the drama. Now, I don't step in all the time. A big thing that I feel is that kids kind of have to learn how to interact with each other themselves, because we don't have someone looking over our shoulders in our adult lives to say, now you have to go and apologize because you did X, Y, Z. But when it explodes into something big, then we can step in and sit down with them and say, okay, here's what went wrong. You didn't notice it, but they were feeling this, and teaching them how to communicate. I think that's something that could be implemented in more schools for sure, but there's going to be drama. I mean, again, I teach 22 kids. I have 5 8th grade girls. There's drama between them. There's no cliques in my school. There's no, I don't have enough kids to have cliques. There's not a big like sports atmosphere. There's not a competition atmosphere because we don't really post grades, and it's not like, all these kids got A's, so they get to go out early or whatnot. We don't have any of that, but the drama still happens because their personalities conflict. They're learning who they are. They're learning how to be with each other. It's friendships. People grow and change, and kids who are best friends in elementary are all of a sudden finding their personalities are clashing. They don't know how to deal with that. That's going to happen in the teenage years because of all the development and all the growth that's happening. So I think the educational system as a whole, and parents as well, the adults in the community and the kids' lives, can do a better job at both holding their hands and kind of letting them go to learn how to deal with it themselves. It's a delicate balance. And there's times when my co-teacher look at it and go, oh gosh, do we need to interfere with this one, or can we let them deal with it themselves? And will it go poorly if we do one or the other? It's a hard dynamic. But the social aspects, it's more complex than just you're shoving them all in a building and they hate it. There's so much going on there.
Okay.
That makes sense.
We are at a little over a minute, an hour and 15. Is there any final things that either of you wanted to say?
Thank you for bringing me on. Thanks for listening to, I'm clearly very passionate about this, so I'm kind of holding back, but it's been very interesting to hear what you guys have to say. Yeah. And I hope we see some improvements.
I totally like having passionate guests on. It makes for a more interesting show.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for coming on. I hope this didn't feel too adversarial. I'm not sure what sort of briefing Enosh gave you as to what the stance would be over here, but I think it's one of those weird things where like you can be pro the people in the system and anti the system. Like I'm one of those. Yeah, it sounds super cliche, but whatever. I'm one of those people that feel like teachers should be paid 4 times, 5 times more. I mean, the idea that the people whose job it is to hone and sculpt young minds to bring forward the next generation of workers and voters and thinkers are being paid, a bit better than, food service wages and often have to like buy their own supplies to give their students the best experience. That stuff's insane. So I think, I guess I just wanted to make it clear that, we, at least I don't want to speak for Enosh, but we support the endeavor. I think it's just the implementation doesn't really, at least I sort of feel doesn't really match up with, the expressed motivation.
Yeah.
But it's awesome to hear that there are programs like yours and that sort of movement is getting more traction. Because I feel like I would have flourished better in that environment. I'm not the kind of kid that could be cut loose and learn my own thing because I would have stayed at home and played video games all day. But I needed some structure. I needed some corralling, but I didn't need the short leash that I had for my first 10 years in school. So anyway, that was my long way of saying thanks, and this was a lot of fun.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, I don't totally agree, but I do agree that if I were to have kids, I would like for you or someone like you to be their teacher, because, that sounds like the sort of way to go forward if I were to ever put them in any sort of real school. Because, again, it's the system that I have issues with. And, God, did you see that thing about they're trying to pass a law to make it illegal for Colorado teachers to strike?
Yeah, that's
yes.
That is, I mean, I understand that once someone is a teacher, they've invested years of their life into this and it's their passion, but so you can't just quit. But I would strongly want to quit, and I don't see how they're going to have any teachers in the future. I mean, telling someone you can't not work that's basically slavery, right? Who wants to sign up for a job where you are enslaved?
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I agree. Overall, I love the concept of education, and I love the trends going forward. And I agree. There's problems in administration in the system. There's problems in my own administration that have made me look at my job and go, what have I gotten myself into? But I don't know. I'm hopeful overall. I think we're going to iron out the kinks. Maybe not by the time our kids, if any of us have kids, are grown up, but hopefully in the next 50 years.
Oh, God, that's depressing. How many millions of children have to be sacrificed?
That sounds super reassuring. I mean, granted, it'll suck for the next, while, but if things are on their way up the whole time, I mean, the other message could be that things are going to get worse until everybody is just miserable. So if people in the industry are confident that things are getting better, that makes me happy.
No, that's true. Getting better is definitely better than getting worse.
And let me say, that 50-year timeline's not in my mind, that's more every school's implementing all these things. We have great educators across the board. Like that's what I'm thinking in that timeline. It's going to take a long time to get all that stuff in place, but I'm hoping that stuff will be put in place very, throughout and tested and changed and growing and evolving. And I think it will, because it is.
So it sounds like charter schools are much better options for kids than public schools at this point. Would you agree with that?
Depends on the charter school. And keep in mind, mine is a public charter school. We are under the district umbrella. And so we do have some limitations, but part of our charter also gives us some freedoms. I would say, if there's any parents listening in and they say, well, charter schools automatically better, you have to look at the schools themselves, look at the kids who are coming out of it, look at the educators in it, look at what their statements are, the programs that they're running, and the things that they're offering. It's really going to depend district by district and school by school. Would
you support the voucher thing that they've been talking about lately, where if someone doesn't want to take their kids to public schools, they can get a voucher to help offset the cost of a private or a charter school? I mean, yes and no. Well, on the surface, it sounds kind of nice. At the same time, the current administration is putting
wanting to put all the money towards the private schools, and that's absolutely abhorrent and cannot happen. Because the majority of kids are in public schools, and even if parents want them to go to a nicer school, there's limitations on transportation, there's limitations on being able to pay for stuff. For example, in my own district, the public school just down the road, they have a bus that can take kids to and from. They have a breakfast and a lunch program, and parents often choose that because they have to work and they can't deal with those things for their kids. Whereas at the charter school, kids have to bring their own lunches. They have to have breakfast beforehand, and parents must provide transportation. So it's not as easy as, well, if they want a better school and a voucher is going to help them. There's lots of factors to put in there. And I don't want money diverted away from public schools when they're already so struggling to have funding to get what the kids need.
I understand what you're saying, but I think if the public schools are doing so poorly, I would rather even very low scale private schools show up, ones that only charge the minimum $2,000 a year and aren't frills or anything, but simply provide an alternative that you can put your kid here for a year instead for that $2,000. So at least there'd be an option.
Again, there's lots of things going into that, and a big reason public schools suck right now is because there's no funding in order to help get better. A lot of these programs I'm talking about, those take money. It takes money to bring in people to train the teachers. It takes money to get the curriculum going. It takes money to get the programs online going. And if they don't have that money, they're stuck. And so it unfortunately does come down, no matter how inspired the teachers and the administration are, if they don't have the money to do what they want to do, it's just not going to happen.
I will say one thing that I think is a really useful service of public schools is that it inculcates a shared culture among everyone in the nation, which I think is a valuable service. And I think there's a lot to be said for some cultures help societies more than others. And I think that is why there were so many schools about what can and can't be taught in schools. And the push for school desegregation was all to impose the sorts of culture that we want on literally everyone in our society. So we all have that shared common bedrock. And I think that's why schools are often such a, battleground for activists, because it does determine what the culture of the next generation is going to be, at least to some extent.
Yeah. I agree. And I'd also want us to keep in mind is that this compulsory all-round education is fairly new. In terms of human history, it's only been, a century or two that we've had this sort of thing. So, we talk about the pros and cons and whatnot, but we have a much more educated society now than we've ever had before. And just like society and technology have grown and changed and usually gotten better, I think that's just going to be the way that this happens here. It's still kind of a baby, really. Mm-hmm. Previous generations and societies haven't had to figure out how to educate without falling into all of these pitfalls, Mm-hmm.
I do think basic numeracy and literacy are just so amazingly valuable and important for everyone in society that everyone should be required to go to school at least through 5th grade to learn those things. And after that, I heard just today that 16% of adults can't read above a 4th grade level anyway. So, it seems like that's all you really need to function. And anything above that I would be more okay with it being voluntary. Either, find your own way in life or keep going to school and keep expanding yourself. I don't know.
My only thought would be if we take that path, everything comes down to money. It's going to divert funding because we have fewer kids in the schools, and the ones who are there and want this opportunity are going to get fewer opportunities. The opportunity is going to close if we take them away.
I would be okay with continuing to pay the same amount of schooling taxes that I have now, even when schools are voluntary and attendance drops by half. I'd be, happy for everyone to suddenly have double the funding per student.
That would be great. Unfortunately, like states like Colorado, where citizens vote on whether or not to fund schools, they often vote not to. So even if those like you are for it, a lot of people aren't. And so it's just such a hard line to balance. And
Yeah, but their taxes wouldn't go up at this point. It would just be that the number of students needed to be serviced by each tax dollar would go down. Although,
but they would vote to give less for their local schools. Yeah, it's weird that people don't want to fund their schools in their community. They think, well, all my kids are already out of school. What do I care? It's like, well, you want educated neighbors, right? But this sounds like it's kind of maybe beyond the scope of education.
Right. Okay, well, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Cool.
Yeah, thanks. Before you go, is there anything you want to plug or anything at all that we can put on the website for you? Any cool, whatever, links to, I don't know, anything? I said that really eloquently.
You could have used some more education, Stephen.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I mean, I don't really plug stuff. I'm a public servant.
That's cool. I just thought I'd ask if anything comes up. You're welcome to send it our way.
I mean, if you guys find any charities or anything or like any movements to fund schools and for education, that'd be great.
Alrighty then.
We'll try and find something. Awesome.
Right. Thanks, and I'm gonna log off so I can go hang with the child.
Cool. Have a good time.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks again so much. Have a good one.
And now on to listener feedback, the listener feedback portion of the show. I'm going to say first that I don't really have any listener feedback to read. I have one from way long ago, which I will touch on, but I have been extremely busy. I was... the audience, I'm assuming, noticed that I was gone for one of the episodes recently because I just could not fit it in with everything that I was doing. But I bought a new place, which I had to do major renovations on before I could move in. And then the building that it's in caught fire, and it didn't actually damage my unit at all, but it put me way behind schedule. And then I had to go to Los Angeles for a week-long workshop and award ceremony since I managed to win one of the Writers of the Future awards for this year. And that was...
Fuck yeah, you did.
Yeah, that was a fucking amazing experience. I wrote up a whole big blog post about that. But basically, I just had absolutely no time at all, and I haven't had time to go back and look at the comments or listener feedback for the last two episodes. So I apologize. I'm only going to have one really old one.
That's totally fine. I think I had a couple of good ones in here, but one of them will take a while to cover. And I want to give it my best, and I'm actually kind of burnt out. It's like 9:30, and I'm old, so
Yeah.
like 5:30 this morning, which is super dumb. So yeah, I will save those. I did have a I don't know what we're going to call it, our whatever this week in rationality thing that we're wanting to plug.
Yeah.
So I'll have one of those, but yeah, I'm ready when you guys are, or rather when you are.
Okay, go ahead.
Oh, I mean, if you wanted to do the
the
let's
one
do
that
the
I had?
feedback thing, and then yeah.
Okay. The one feedback that I had from way back was from episode 50, Approaching Rationality with Kyle Moore. Eddie says, Ineash made the claim that the CDC has killed far more people than it has saved, which I found to be an outrageously unqualified claim, especially coming from you guys, especially on this podcast. And I wanted to say, holy shit, if I said CDC, I am extremely sorry, and I want to walk that back as far as possible because I love the CDC. They have all my hearts. They managed to fucking cure polio and smallpox and, oh my god, Jay Diani's amazing blog post, 500 million, but not one more, which is just... It's fantastic. It is a classic in rationalism. The CDC does great work, and I love them. So if I said CDC, I apologize. What I meant to say was FDA. And I do think the FDA is on net negative. I think they do good things with food safety, which is nice. But the amount of delays and rejections of beneficial drugs and just the sheer amount of money that has been poured into getting a few drugs to market and stops any other drugs that are less profitable than that being even researched is just a damn disgrace. And I think that they should not be not be nearly, not even to 1/10 of the level as restrictive on drugs as they are.
It's like we should have a food administration and a drug administration.
Yes, and then we should murder the drug administration.
Yeah, my inner libertarian agrees with you, and my inner, I don't know. I imagine not feeling very eloquent at this late. Part of me thinks that that could go badly. You want some. In some of my moods, I want some control on what hits the shelves, right? But to have, what is it, something like 10 or 15 years between we think this works to where it can hit the shelves at Walgreens?
Yeah.
That's sort of a huge drag.
After waiting for 5 goddamn years for Vasogel, I just finally went and got a vasectomy because I realized it is not going to happen in my reproductively productive lifetime.
Vasogel, was that some sort of male contraceptive?
Yeah. It was basically the male equivalent of the IUD, where they put some things in your vas deferens and it prevents the sperm from going through, and it's reversible. And they just
ouch.
Yeah. I just never got around to approving it.
Huh. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I could see that'd be. Yeah. I guess. Man, I'm not feeling it. I hear what you're saying, and that sounds good. I think I used all my brain juice. I was trying to, with our guest, I didn't know how much preamble you gave her on where we were coming from, and then I think I noticed pretty quickly that her tone said I feel ambushed, and I'm like, oh shit. Yeah. So I was trying to.
Probably should. Well, I did tell her that I'm rather against schooling the way it is, and that there would be a lot of, I dislike it, and let's start a fight. So I think she was ready for the pushback she was going to get.
Good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure I should have asked about that. We kind of started a few minutes late. I think it was fun. I agree with you on most everything that you were saying, except I felt like we got bogged down a couple times. It was fun because we really disagree. So I had what were we going to call it? Our whatever rationally interesting thing every 2 weeks. We don't want to completely rip off Julia Galef's rationally speaking pick.
Okay.
We can't call it the Bayesian conspiracy pick. That sounds too copyright infringement-y.
Can we call it the Bayesian conspiracy choice? What's really close to pick?
CC.
All right. The conspirators. We'll come up with something. By the time this episode,
we'll think of something funny.
Yeah, in 2 weeks we'll have something decent.
So this was there was a fun case in the history of the rationality movement where Eliezer Yudkowsky was responding to the charge that basically the Neil deGrasse Tyson charge, which he has since changed his mind on after listening to Eliezer Yudkowsky on Sam Harris's podcast.
Neat.
He was at some sort of panel. He grabbed a microphone and he was talking about how, hey, I heard this podcast and changed my mind. So that's kind of cool because his position was the fairly standard thing that it's easy enough to keep your AI boxed, and by that it means don't plug it into the internet and just talk to it. And if it seems evil, you shoot it with a shotgun or you unplug it.
Yeah, or like you said, if it goes evil, you just throw a glass of water on it.
Yes. So that used to be Tyson's stance, and that's a not uncommon thing to encounter. And Yudkowsky said, all right, cool. You know what? Why don't you play the role of the AI researcher? I'll play the role of the AI. Give me 2 hours to convince you to let me out of the box. Because Yudkowsky wanted to prove the point that if you're encountering something that's smarter than you, who wants to be let out, humans aren't immune from unwillingly being persuaded, right? Brain hacking. So the charge was accepted, and under the terms that I think that the winner would get $10 or something, and they couldn't talk about what happened. And it turned out that Yudkowsky got $10. That's all everyone knows. And so the moderator of whatever forum this was, because this was the early days of the internet, said, hey, I'm calling bullshit. Let's do this. Yudkowsky did it again and won again, and this time $20. And so there are speculations abound about how he managed to do this. the only hint he would say was that there were no tricks. I just did it the hard way. All of the ways that I could think of to do it were like tricks. Be like, I'll give you $20 after this if you give me $10 now, and let people think I won, or really cheat and like kidnap their children and say, look, you can have your kids back if you let me win this conversation or something, right? Or do it on the case of like, think about what this will do for like AI safety research if people think that this is a threatening problem and I win this or something. Yeah. So anyway, I found a case online. I was talking to coworkers about this and I was Googling AI blocks to send them something. And now I'm finding the link on, it looks like Lesser Wrong, but if it's Less Wrong, it looks way different than it used to. Whatever it is, the link will be on the website. Yeah,
Less Wrong actually, Lesser Wrong has been moved over fully to Less Wrong recently. So now what was Less Wrong is a port of Lesser Wrong.
Well, I guess I like the name more, but I'm going to have to get used to the new format because Googling it now looks different. So that's cool to know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Less Wrong as it was basically just an archive, and now it is
sure.
An archive plus all this other new interesting discussion that is happening again.
It's alive!
Yay!
Yay! So, anyway, this post was called "How to Win the AI Box Experiment." Sometimes, and basically, this guy and his friend did this, and the person playing the AI got out, and they published their dialogue in a pretty ugly reading format. But I read through the whole thing because it was really interesting.
Yeah,
and he talks about like the setup, the response afterwards, and like how he felt when the whole thing was going on and after. And there are some constraints that some people think it doesn't quite pass, but or rather that it's not representative, but whatever. I think it is considered a win.
Cool. I mean, he let the AI out of the box at the end.
Yeah, but they set up like a specific role-playing thing that someone challenged, so this isn't exactly indicative of like how it would go. It's a long, fun post, and I strongly suggest that before you read through the text exchange of how he did this, to spend the good rationalist 5 minutes by a clock at least thinking of how you would do this. I threw out some ideas earlier, but there are other ways. And this guy went a route that I would never have tried. I thought it was really interesting. And so I had to share this. I found this a couple months ago, and that's actually why I wanted to bring up like the that, and we did the episode on keeping up with the rationalists. But anyway, this was a lot of fun. Strong recommend to check this out. And the AI box experiment was to me one of the like fun intro topics, especially if AI comes up, which it often does in their daily lives with our coworkers. So I'm being funny. You don't talk about AI like every other week at your work,
Actually, I don't because I'm an accountant, but since you're a programmer, I thought maybe you did.
No, that's why I realized you didn't laugh. Yeah.
I was like, that's kind of cool. I wish I worked in a programmer's office place. What do they call places where programmers are corralled? Like stables? Is that it?
Yeah, that sounds right. Ping pong table.
Yeah.
So there's actually they sent out a course that apparently everybody in the company has to take, or at least every dev. I think it's everybody in the company. It's a 50-minute course on AI and machine learning, and this was at like the company all hands webcast thing. I call it the 5-minute hate because it makes me think of 1984. But they're like, oh yeah, everybody has to take this because this is like this whole new up and coming thing. And I'm like, oh fuck off. And it was a 15-minute course, and I kind of joked, and I was like, oh yeah, shit, call Elon Musk. This is easy enough to learn in an hour. We're all going to die.
Yeah.
But anyway, so you mentioned that are people talking about it? The answer is weirdly yes, but not in anything that has anything to do with any of our jobs whatsoever. So
okay.
If that was boring, we can cut that.
No. How about for just me and our Patreon subscribers, you give us a spoiler and tell us how it happened, or would that ruin everything?
We can have it out there, and then I guess our Patreon supporters could go and find it if they want the spoiler. But I still encourage them to go through and read this. But basically, what he did was he engaged
hold on. This next part is only for our Patreon subscribers. Haha! We now have exclusive content. For the rest of you, just go and read it because that's what Stephen recommends doing anyway. He says it's much more fun to read through it yourself. Okay,
yes,
continue.
He does. I also say that for our Patreon supporters, but if you guys want a quick spoiler, and at the end, the guy is just like, I'm letting you out of the box.
Holy shit.
The person playing the AI, when he was talking about it, he said that he just sat there, he was sweating. Like, this whole thing, they got really into it.
Yeah.
And that he was there sweating and shaking. And he's like, I thought he was fucking with me, or he was going to be like, haha, or something, but it blew my fucking mind. Reading this was kind of a trip. It was fun.
Yeah.
So yeah,
really, it's important to actually read it through and get like all the emotion in it. It's like a good story. Someone can summarize the story to you, and it doesn't count at all. You know, you actually have to watch Star Wars in order to get Star Wars. You know. Yeah, or Infinity War, which I've now seen 3 times. It's outstanding. Oh, holy shit! Okay.
But that's nothing for me. But it was. I saw it a couple times last week and then once today. So
I guess Star Wars is a better example. It's more like The Matrix. No one can be told what The Matrix is. You have to see it for yourself.
That's not bad. Yes, I mean that's fair. I did say within like 90 minutes, unless they're really fast reading or at skimming. Reading the post itself is pretty long, and then the text exchange is fairly long as well. So
yeah, well, I mean, it was a 2-hour text exchange.
If you just wanted it's surprising, they'd spend a minute or two between things, so it was only a few hundred lines long.
Oh, okay, that's not bad at all.
Specifically, it was in lines because I had to open it in like a non-standard text editor to be able to format it so I could read it.
Okay.
That might have been a Mac problem or something, or however I downloaded it, but whatever it was. Anyway, so yeah, if you want to save some time, that's how it worked out. But it was a lot of fun. Strong recommend, and that's that.
Cool. Thank you. That was awesome.
Yeah, you bet.
Okay. Oh, and to our audience, thanks for listening. Bye.
Thanks, guys. Yeah. Oh, wait, hold on. We've got 2 more things.
Oh, yes, we do. We have to thank people.
We've got to thank our sound engineer for bringing this sweet, sweet audible chocolate to your ears, Kyle Moore. And Eneasz, do you want to thank our Patreon supporter this week? Or this episode?
I can totally do that. This week, we would like to thank Nick Lowry. Have we thanked Nick Lowry before?
Man, you're asking the wrong person.
The name sounds familiar. You know what? Maybe he got thanked twice. This week, we'd like to thank our Patreon supporter, Nick Lowry, for helping make this possible, bring this to you guys. Yeah. Thanks, Nick.
Thanks, Nick. You rock.
Yeah.
All right. And with that, we can call it an episode.
Cool. Have a good one.
All right. Thanks. You too, man.
Bye-bye.